Welcome to the Same Day Podcast, where we discuss driving incremental business growth and other topics related to real estate, property management, and entrepreneurship. Now, to the show at hand.
Matt Zalk here. I'm the host of the Same Day Podcast, where I connect with top business experts and real estate leaders. Past guests that we've had on the show include Vondell Burns from Thankless Productions, Chip Gabrino, a local real estate entrepreneur and restaurateur, and Brooke Reuter talking about contract for deed versus lease to own properties. We've also had Elliot Nelson from McNally's Group discussing community development through restaurants and bars. Today's episode is brought to you by Chris Lyle State Farm. Chris Lyle State Farm helps you protect your most precious assets and investments. Whether it's your home and auto, investment rental properties, or other valuables, call Chris Lyle State Farm for a quick and painless phone call to potentially save double digits on all of your insurance needs. Visit diallyle.com or call his office at 918-878-7771. Today's episode is also brought to you by Keyrenter Property Management. Here at Keyrenter Property Management, we are a full-service property management company helping our clients buy, renovate, and operate assets. That's why no matter what rental you have, single-family homes, condos, townhomes, apartments, we have the management solutions that you need. We help our clients build wealth while taking the headache out of property management. Go to keyrenterpmc.com or email us at info@keyrenterpmc.com. Before introducing today's guest, I want to give a huge shout-out to the EO Network. That's Entrepreneurs Organization for introducing Adam and I. EO Globally is an amazing organization. It's an amazing network of entrepreneurs that are doing all sorts of amazing things, and our chapter in Tulsa is no different. Without further ado, Adam Sedlak is the owner and operator of Level Home Foundation Repairs, where they do interior and exterior foundation piering, crawl space repair, concrete lifting, foam injections, and a ton of other stuff, including French drains and seamless gutters and sump pumps and crawl spaces and other stuff. The guttering business was a loss leader that helped him get foundation work. And as you'll hear, the lack of gutters is a huge reason why foundations shift in the first place, with the shrinking and swelling of water in the soil. Adam Sedlak, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm great. Thank you. Want to talk about foundation repair, piers, concrete foam injection, slab removal and replacement, all these things that the average homeowner or rental homeowner has no clue about. But before we do that, let's start with, how in the heck did you get into the business of foundation repairs?
So I was actually coming to Oklahoma specifically to work for a buddy who started a company, and I knew nothing about it. Kind of got thrown into it just fortuitously, I guess you could say, looking back. But at the end of the day, him and his father were car salesmen, and they kind of found something that they thought was a niche market. What I didn't know is what I was coming into was like a situation with no training and no kind of expertise behind them. And there was some things happening that I just more or less didn't feel comfortable with. So I just took the initiative to really get with the engineers, learn the ins and outs of the business, kind of what could be done, what was being done, what should be done, and really ran with it. Helped them out for a while, kind of fixing some things, but you can only take other people so far past their own vision. So
yeah. What year was that?
Something I ended up I started my company in 2017.
Cool.
And I worked for them for about 6 years prior to that.
Got it.
So probably 2010.
So you ended up learning most of the stuff on the job, just talking to engineers, getting curious, and building what you could while you were still working for them, and ultimately took it to a new place on your own.
Yeah, I wanted to better their process. I've always been kind of a loyal person, so I didn't see it as a fault of theirs. I didn't think they were malicious. I just thought they were content and with something that maybe they weren't seeing or understanding completely.
Yeah.
So I really worked with them to try to get their business running in the way I would want to run one. But there's always so much pushback that you can deal with before you just decide, okay, well, it'd be easier if I just went and did this kind of deal.
Yeah. So since 2017, how big have you grown? How many people are on your team full time now?
So today we have 15 people running.
Great.
It's just one of those. A few of them are subs because most days we're running about 11 people. So we bring give or take a few guys, just depending on the workload. But for the most part, I've had the same guys since I opened the doors.
And what's the scariest part in hindsight of jumping off on your own and starting your own business?
Just faith in yourself. So it's one of those things that when you run a company or you're an entrepreneur mindset, you probably only see the shortcomings in your business. There's no one really there to pat you on the back
Yeah.
and say, good start, good job. So it's one of those that, am I doing it right? Where
Yeah.
do I need to go? Am I far enough? Am I on track kind of deal?
Yeah. Interesting. Let's talk for a second about concrete slab removal replacement. I was on your website. I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, how in the heck do you remove a concrete slab while the structure, I think the picture shows that it's a house that's down to the studs, while the structure is still fundamentally on top of the slab? Is that what's going on in that picture on your website or no?
I haven't been on the website in a while. I did build it, so I should know, but honestly, I'm not sure which picture. But yeah, we do complete slab replacements. And it's kind of a funny story how I got into the first one. It was we were doing a pier job for a family, and we had to do piers all the way around the perimeter. And come to find out, the son-in-law was planning on removing and replacing the slab on the inside, which curiosity killed the cat in this scenario. I kind of asked him, what he was planning on doing there. And he said he was going to try to lift all the framing off the concrete a few inches, remove the slab, and pour it back,
But
which
wait,
logically does
yeah, it doesn't make sense at all.
100%.
Well, first of
So
all,
it was
there's
just like,
two fundamental problems. You've got to lift the entirety of a structure, and then you've got nothing to support it on unless somehow you have it supported from the outside, and you like put enough LVL under it, and the span can hold, and then you lift it up simultaneously. It doesn't make sense. And then also all of the framing, the base plates are all nailed to the concrete inherently.
correct. And there's two parts of a foundation. There's the footing. When they built the home, they dug the perimeter out, poured
Yeah.
concrete, and built. Those are your exterior walls. And then all your framing is essentially attached to that outside framing. So if you were to try to lift it 3 inches, you would just tear everything from the outside walls. So to me, it was concerning, but they were going to let him do it, and you can tell he was apprehensive about doing it. Maybe bit off more than he could chew. So although I didn't want to take on the project, I just told him, hey, why don't y'all let me handle this? Gave them a number, and they were more than happy to let me take on the burden. Luckily, we've done so many structural repairs. It was something that was a little bit nerve wracking, but we had an engineer behind us that was willing to let us give it a go, who signed off on it before, signed off on it after, and really came out well.
So engineers
Um,
are your best friends in this business. They're the ones that kind of
yeah,
support
they
the math behind what you're doing.
they really should be. I think there's a lot of companies that try to get away from engineers. It's one more hiccup in the sales process.
Yeah.
It's one more person outside of your control you have to appease. But at the end of the day, if you can get the engineers to appreciate what you're doing, it saves you liability. You always have someone to bounce ideas off of, and the homeowner deserves to have that paperwork when they go to sell that home.
But then it goes to reason that it doesn't make sense if you're shifting the liability to the engineer and his main business is absorbing that liability and making sure that his calculations are right and that the structure will be sound. It doesn't make sense that you'd ever in-house an engineer and have somebody on staff that does engineering.
So we would bring one on because at the end of the day, we're not really concerned about the shifting of the liability. It's just a advantage, I guess you could say, to have one more eyes and ears on the project, to give a thumbs up. But we would bring on an engineer if we felt that it was worth his time. But right now, there's so many engineering companies in town, it's almost better to outsource it.
Yeah.
We do pay engineer fees, and it's probably cheaper than what we might pay an in-house engineer overall for the year.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Let's talk about all the kinds of things that you do. I still want to understand how you do concrete slab removal and replacement. I didn't get to that, but let's talk about everything you do. You do steel piers. You do concrete slab removal replacement. You do, let me get back to your website somewhere. I don't know where your website went. It came off my
Well,
screen. You do, well, I mean, your website's pretty amazing. Crawl space repair, which means you go under the house and you actually like shore up the beams that support the floor. concrete lifting foam injection, which is the middle of the slab is actually broken a little bit and has been compacted because of soil, or has moved because there's compacting of the soil underneath. Then you do all sorts of helical piers. That's actually like drilling through the concrete and then finding a substrate that's strong enough to support you going back up. Is that right?
That or pre-construction. So if you don't have the
Okay.
weight for a resistance pier, you can drill something into the ground before you build it.
Okay. And then termite damage replacement. That's a similar thing to essentially a crawl space repair, because you have you're going in and shoring up the structure in a wood way, right?
Yeah, just kind of rebuilding the crawl space from joists, seal plates, support beams. We kind of line it out in several terms on the website because everyone doesn't really know what each term means. So we try to help them understand what we do there.
Okay. And then when you at some level you realize that the main cause of foundation shifting was related to water coming off the roof, and so you decided that both drainage systems and guttering was probably a good business to get into. And I don't know if you still do that, but essentially those two are kind of the husband and wife of foundation issues, right?
Yeah, so shrink swell is the reason for a lot of settlement. You can imagine if one side of your home is swelling and shrinking due to moisture more than the other side, you're getting that movement that creates the cracks and the differential kind of separations and gaps around windows and doors. So by solidifying the ground and stopping that shrink swell, you really solve a lot of the base issues that create settlement.
So how important
Uh,
is it to have guttering around your house? Like, is this something, if you don't have it for a year, it's going to destroy your foundation or create that shrink swell? Is it 10 years? Does it matter anyways that we go through droughts for 3 months or 4 months? I mean, how much impact does moisture have in the soil?
it's a pretty major impact in Oklahoma. It's all clays. So you can look at it like this. It's if you're going to have varying seasons like droughts and rainy seasons, all you can do is try to keep some consistency around your home. So if you do run that water out, a lot of people will not only install gutters, but they'll take those gutter downspouts all the way to the street.
Mm.
Then the soil around the home's not ever oversaturated or undersaturated. It just stays pretty consistent. Now there's always going to be variations, but at the end of the day, if you can stop the shrink swell, you can stop a lot of the core problems.
But so what's the point of putting a pier if your soil is always shrinking and compacting? If you don't address the gutter issue and the water entering the soil or changing over time, the moisture content of the soil, what does a pier actually do?
So ultimately, the reason for piers is because when they build your home, they do a really good job of compacting that soil. Most building codes require a certain level of compaction to make sure the dirt's really solid and the home's not going to sink into it. But the shrink swell over any course of time is actually loosening that compaction. So as it gets bigger with swelling, and then goes back to shrinking, then that's just loosening the soil. And the weight of your home slowly starts to settle down into that loosened soil. So the point of a pier is we can get under that wall once you've lost compaction and drive steel down to bedrock and basically sit your home on a stilt so it
Mm.
stops moving with the
Mm.
soil.
How deep is that bedrock generally down below the I guess the what would you call it, soil grade?
Well, everywhere's different. You may have a pier that's 18 feet to bedrock. You may have a pier that's 40.
Wow.
Oklahoma, your standard is about 20 feet. Yeah.
And so you drive steel down to 20 to 40 feet into the earth? I mean, it's
Yeah.
just long steel pipes.
Correct. Yeah, you dig under the wall or the footing. Most people don't realize their home only goes underground about 2 feet. So your whole home is still sitting on the soil. It's not sitting on rocks. It's not sitting on anything solid. It's just sitting on dirt that's been compacted. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll dig underneath the wall. We'll use hydraulic equipment to drive steel until refusal. Could be blue or gray shale, could be bedrock, really just something that's load bearing stratum, and we'll actually lift the home and set it on this steel stilt and essentially taking it off the soil.
But how do you actually drill down 20 feet? Is it like steel pipe, and then you add another steel pipe and another steel pipe, and is it like one solid piece of metal that's 20 feet long?
It would be nice if we could drive a 20-foot piece. The less joints, the better. But you're absolutely right. It's you're adding sections, and
Okay.
sections. There'll be an interior sleeve and an outer sleeve, and they kind of align. And you just keep driving it.
So does that mean you charge differently whether it's 25 feet or 20 feet? Because it takes you more material,
So
more steel.
100%. Generally, you're going to find somewhere between 16 to 20 feet in Tulsa. So our contract states that your pier price is up to 20 feet, and then anything over 20 feet will charge $8 a foot.
Interesting. That covers material costs and a little bit of, I guess, labor putting it down. $8 a foot's not a lot of money, realistically. So
no, it's definitely a
much.
Discounted rate, just so we don't lose money.
Yeah. So the most common foundation problems that you encounter are what? Like that the outsides are sloping away because of the shrink swell, and the middle of the house is kind of staying upright?
Yeah, it really depends on the foundation type. I think with slab on grade, it's usually your exterior that's sinking, your footing. With a crawl space, it's usually either inadequate support or failed support, and it's sinking towards the middle. Sometimes it's a combination of both. It really just comes down to where the fail point is. If you got a crawl space and everything sits on the dirt and you're taking on water, essentially everything's sitting on mud, and it's not too long before some of that stuff settles down.
And so if it's a crawl space issue and it's kind of sinking towards the middle, or whatever you call it, divoting towards the middle, you actually get into the crawl space, take massive LVL or big wood beams and just put them on post jacks on cinder block or on steel plates or something, and just jack it up until the house is actually sitting perfectly flat.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of these crawl spaces. It's like the honey-do list over the years. Someone got under there and stacked some bricks. Yeah. So what we try to do is 100%. You might find a football just holding up as a shim. But at the end of the day, if consistency is the name of the game on crawl space, so if you can build one beam that is from front to back, and generally you do that from underneath, you keep building it until it's one piece, then you can support that evenly and really have a lot of consistency through the home. I think a lot of people, where they mess up on crawl space, is they might have an 8-foot section butt up against an 8-foot section because it's easier to get it under there.
Yeah.
But then you have all these joints that aren't working together.
But so how do you ultimately get a 20-foot section in there to avoid that multi-section problem?
So you'd basically build the beam from underneath. So you'll take a bunch of lumber, probably 10 footers, because you can get it through the crawl space door and maneuver it underneath. You'll build a small section, and you'll basally go like this all the way, until you get to the end. If you build it correctly, it's actually a very strong situation. And if it works together, you have way more ease of lifting and leveling the home. Whereas if everything does this, you have to lift this, hope this matches, hope that doesn't settle. It's just an issue.
And then you use steel jacks on steel plates to keep it up?
We do offer a steel jack. What you generally find is those steel jacks, the adjustable ones, have a very inadequate base, so they'll rust out in due time. It's like a small stainless steel base, probably 1/4 inch at best. So we try to stay away from adjustable jacks unless we're really building up on a tall crawl space. We like to do a concrete base pad. It's best practices is if you can pour, which is a lot of work, and I know it sounds crazy to drag concrete, but if you can dig out enough room to pour a proper base pad, you have way less chances of it sinking in the mud because crawl spaces stay wet.
What is a good size for a concrete pad that you're going to put under a crawl space?
A lot of engineers, they like to see an 18 by 18 by 18. Which is a beating to dig out from.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, you're fine. Yeah, it's a beating to dig out from your back. I'm sure it's like hard to fathom. But yeah, you will shove a bunch of guys in there and tell them if they don't finish, they don't get lunch. And at the end of the day,
that's like you're working in I mean, maybe 2 feet of space, but often less, right? So you're just like, I can imagine somebody with like a spade shovel and just like trying to just chunk out little bits of earth so that you can eventually put a form in. I mean, you take 2x4s and actually form up an 18 by 18 pad and then
Most
pour
of it's
concrete.
formed in the ground. Yeah, you dig the proper size hole and try to pour it in, and then you got to drag the concrete under there. We do offer pre-poured base pads that are just higher strength, so that's an
Mhm.
option as well. But it just depends on the moisture content of the crawl space. Because if it's too wet, you really want to pour something. If it's something that's always dry, you can put like a 16 by 16 by 6 or 4 under there that's precast, and it's more than adequate. But it just comes down to the space. But hats off to our guys because some of the stuff that they do
Yeah.
would just, we've never had a customer who wasn't blown away. We'll put it that way.
Why does a crawl space that stays more wet require pouring it on site?
Just because there's a lot of weight that's sitting on those pads. So if that ground is, they basically sit on grade or dirt. So if that dirt is wet, it's essentially sitting on mud. If you can dig down a couple feet or 18 inches, then you know
Got
that
it.
you're past a lot of the stuff that's going to saturate.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So mud jacking is another thing. And I've seen it like we've put piers on the exterior portions of homes, and then you kind of rip up the carpet and see that there's like stitching in the concrete where somebody may have kind of cut out a section. I don't even know how it works, but they put in rebar and they re-pour the concrete so that they can stop whatever's cracking, settling, whatever else. But correct me if I'm wrong, but the better alternative is actually to do a foam injection. Is that right?
So it's actually solving different problems with a lot of
Okay.
the foam. Like we just did a pretty big foam job yesterday. We also stitched. The way you want to look at that stuff is foam or mud jacking is going to lift the concrete.
Okay.
Technically, we prefer foam injection because we feel mud jacking is kind of a dated process.
What's the
Is
difference between mud jacking and foam?
Mud jacking is like pumping a bunch of mortar under the concrete. So you can imagine that the spread on it's not the same as a chemical that's expanding.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a lot of weight and it's still cementitious, meaning it's water soluble.
Mm-hmm.
The polyurethane's about a third of the weight, has better expansion properties, and it's hydrophobic, so it'll never get washed out.
But so it's
Um,
so you can inject in a foam that's so strong that when it expands and then dries, it actually will lift the house, lift the middle of the slab.
Correct, and
That's
we
crazy.
actually, I'm not sure how many companies do or don't. I think we're the only one that offers several different products on the same project. So we have foams that will lift the slab. We have foams that will fill the voids. We have foams that will inject deep into the earth to repair the substratum. It just really comes down to the issue, but it allows us a lot more options as far as getting to the root cause of the problem. But the foam generally cures to like a 9,500 psi, whereas concrete's about 4,500.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
it's
insane.
something that
So, but you would think that the weight of the house would allow it to find like cure to any strength you want. But the idea that it would expand into like if a slab is here, that it would come in and expand and actually push the slab up where it was formerly divoted. That's crazy to think about.
what when it's all hydrostatic pressure, it's the same way like a cylinder on a tractor works, or the same way we're driving the steel into the ground. It's when you put a certain amount of volume into any space, it creates a pressure that's
Yeah.
unfathomable. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um, the foams are really great for filling these voids from plumbing leaks, from plumbing repairs where they just can't compact it the way it used to be. Some homes will be on the side of a hill and have water running underneath them, which creates pathways from the migration of the water. So the foam really is the proper solution there, and having a couple different blends, if you will, on hand really allows us to not only lift the slab, but to fill all the voids and do whatever's necessary to get it right.
But so what do you do? Drill a hole in the interior slab of the concrete and just like jam down essentially a rod, like a tube that has an open hole at the end of it, and it crudely, I
Yeah,
mean,
similar.
probably a more
We
sophisticated
have
tool than that, but then just start injecting the foam.
You're right on key. It's ultimately that we have two options there. There's a surface injection where we'll drill a 5/8 hole about the size of a nickel, and we'll just stick a nozzle into that hole and inject it between the dirt and the concrete.
Mm-hmm.
We also have a deep injection where we'll drill a 3/4 inch hole, run black iron pipe to, let's say, 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet, and inject it deep down in the soil. So it really just comes down to the weight of the structure, what we're trying to do and what we're trying to avoid. Are there air ducts under the slab? The deep injections really allow us to bring the earth back up.
Mm-hmm.
If water's been leaking for a long time, it didn't just affect the surface, it probably affected wherever it migrated to. So we do offer something like DCP testing, where we can find where the weak parts are in the soil, inject the foam at that depth, and really solve the root cause so it doesn't happen again.
But I kind of imagine it like similar to drilling for oil. If you put a straw into the earth, you might suck out a little bit of oil, but if you don't then drill horizontally, you've just tapped one pocket, but and then you've got to like kind of poke a bunch of holes into the earth so that you can suck all the oil out in adjacent pockets. Does that not happen? I mean, you fill in all the injectable pockets that are in one spot, and you got to go over 6 inches or 8 inches or 5 feet and inject another spot.
We like to do a grid pattern about 4 foot on square. So
Yeah.
you'll just go, if you got a room, you'll basically take every 4 foot in any direction, and you'll make a grid pattern in the floor to really make sure that you can fill any void that might be there.
And then you just fill it back in with concrete to the depth of that, whatever the 6 inches of concrete of that slab anyhow.
Now, the foam will usually come back out the hole because it's path of least resistance. So you're just putting maybe an inch of patch on the top of that hole to just seal it off.
That foam anyways is stronger than the concrete, so it's no big deal.
Technically, and it's really great for broken slabs. I mean, you're kind of gluing it back together. Interior piers are nice if you have a good thick slab with rebar, but a lot of homes in Tulsa, they just don't have rebar because they're built in the 80s and they have a broken slab. So interior piers are adverse to the repair.
Well, how would you even do an interior pier? You have to drill a big enough hole so that you can get, if the pier needs to go here, you have to drill a hole here so that you can go here and pier down under it. But if there's rebar and you're doing the interior pier, then you got to cut through that rebar to get there. That doesn't sound intuitive.
Yeah. So the job we did today was from an engineer who had us do 23 interior piers. And what we did is we core drilled an 8-inch hole. We basically have a bracket that we designed that will go into that hole and kind of brace around it. We have a mechanism that attaches to that bracket and drives the pier similar to how it would outside. If we don't have enough resistance to drive the pier, we have something called helicals to where we can actually drill them in instead of pushing them in.
Wow.
So we don't need resistance for those.
Wow. What can homeowners do to prevent the risk of kind of interior foundation issues?
So it's plumbing leaks. Make sure your plumbing's checked. Hydrostatic test before you buy a house. If you do have
that's
a repair,
presumably on copper lines, right? I mean, you're not going to have any sort of new construction with PEX. You're not going to have any sort of that issue, I guess.
Well, it's actually more or less the drain lines. New construction is a little bit different, but it's the drain lines are the silent killer because no one knows it in their water bill. They don't see an erosion happening under their home every time they flush a toilet. So generally what we find when people have slab issues is a broken drain line or an old cast iron drain line that went bad and nobody knew until it started sinking.
Wow. But then the issue is that you're down there putting steel pipes into a bunch of human waste. That can be gross.
Yeah. So we actually have to work around all that plumbing. Today we had to work around gas lines and water lines and air ducts that were in the slab.
If you have cast iron that's corroded over time and is now thin walled and has broken, it's going to continue to be a problem until you actually get down there 2 feet down into the earth and fix that concrete, that cast iron pipe, though.
And before you're calling us out, we're making you get a plumbing test and fix your plumbing problems, because what's the point of doing it all if you haven't solved that first?
So then the plumber's going to come in, like pull up your toilet, jackhammer through your concrete slab after they've done this hydrostatic test to realize that you're leaking water. And then I mean, how do they even do it? They go to the main line, they cap off the main, or they go to your clean out. Theoretically, if you don't have a clean out, they got to create a clean out. They put a ball in there to prevent the water from leaking through there. They fill your toilet, not the bowl, but the line underneath it. That they fill that with water, and then if they find that it's leaking, then they realize that there's a problem where there's a leak into the ground, and then they've got to dig up the concrete. They've got to go down as far as the leak is, and that could be between your clean out and the toilet area. There could be 10, 15, 20 feet, and they've got to find that leak. So I guess they camera it, figure out where the thing is, where the leak is, and they've got to pull up the concrete there and fix the leak. Holy moly.
Yeah, they camera it. They do isolation, so they'll clog it in certain areas to see if they can pinpoint where it's at. I've seen some people do a smoke test, which I still don't understand, but I'll leave that to them. But at the end of the day, yeah, they will locate it, they will repair it, and then they'll patch their hole, and then we can come in and fix the foundation.
What is a smoke test? They just put a smoke bomb down essentially, and then they can find somehow from the worn galvanized that comes through penetrates through the concrete or penetrates somehow?
Beats me. I don't know if it like leaves a residue that they can camera and find later. I don't know if they can see where it's leaking, but that's above my pay grade. I'll leave it at that.
Wow. Okay. So preventative measures, I guess you don't even really know. There's no way to prevent your plumbing lines from leaking. It's just that you can assess it more frequently. It's kind of like diagnosing breast cancer. You just go and make sure you have an MRI every once in a while, and then have a test done so you can get it early, detect it.
Yeah, it's just correlating damages. If you start to see something, get it checked. If you start to see something else, it's pretty common there's an issue. Really where people can help themselves out is outside drainage, French drains if you have ponding water around the home, tight lines to run those downspouts to the street. Really anything where you can keep some consistent moisture content or moisture levels around your home to where it's not overly swelling and overly shrinking with the seasons.
Yeah. So you're a busy guy. I mean, you're always doing these repairs. It takes a while to get you on the phone, as I know, because you're very busy. And you used to do gutters and drainage solutions. How is that still a business that you do? When you kind of explained it to me earlier, you were saying the main reason for some of the foundations issues because water is sitting around the house. So it makes total sense that somebody says, I've got an issue, and you say, cool, let's fix the issue, but let's also fix what's causing. I guess let's fix the symptom, but let's also fix the issue that's causing that symptom. Is that something you still do, or do you refer that business out generally?
Yeah, we still do drainage systems, tight lines, French drains, all that good stuff, sump pumps and crawl spaces. We used to give away free gutters with foundation repairs when I first started as kind of it protects our warranty a little bit. It was a way as a loss leader. It was the buffet at the casino kind of deal. But it really helped us out get going. We just got so busy that we just didn't have the time for the gutters. So we started subbing that out, but we do still handle the tight lines, the French drains and the pump systems. It's so crucial to actually solving the root cause.
Yeah. Do you find that most of your business comes from referrals? Because if one house in one area is potentially, has cracks, it might be a subdivision level issue where a builder didn't properly compact, or where it's just generally the soil is weaker in that area.
Yeah, I would say we're about 70-30, 70% engineers and customer referrals and 30% advertising. For the past 3 years, I didn't really do any advertising. We were just so busy with keeping up with people who wanted to talk to us.
Yeah.
But I did start advertising a little bit more as I started adding to the team and keeping everybody fed.
A really good sign, though, if you're getting a majority of your referrals from the engineers who bear the liability of the work that you do to some extent. I mean, that's a really good sign.
100%. The only bad reviews we've ever gotten are people that we didn't have time to get free estimates to. Yeah. You know how that works.
That stinks. We sometimes get that. It's like this, we have a prospective tenant that doesn't get approved for an application and they slam us. And it's like, I'm sorry, you've got a 495 credit score. I just can't lease a house to you. I'm sorry. Generally speaking, those people on our website, at least when they give Google reviews, they misspell things and have poor punctuation. So it looks bad. And I just go, okay, you can tell that they're not the most sophisticated. Tell me for a second, what goes into pricing a foundation repair and how long does a repair generally take?
So we stand out in that aspect. We have a small army, so most of our repairs only take a day or two. The job we were on today took yesterday and today, and two other companies quoted them a week and a half.
Wow.
This
that was 23, you said, right? 23 interior repairs?
Yeah, interior repairs. So you can imagine every room in the house is being disturbed. It's something that people can't move out of their home just to get their home repaired. It's already an ungratifying expense. So we really take care to get in there and get out of there so we don't disturb people's lives any longer than necessary. But 1 to 2 days, typical repair. Pricing varies. You can be anywhere from $650 to $800 a pier, depending on type, volume, things like that. And then foam injection is priced per square foot, typically, depending on volume, I should say.
And that's price per square foot, price per volume of what you actually inject. And what you actually inject is a function of like how much you have to inject such that it gets to the place and starts creating the lift that you need. So it's really hard to tell, I guess, what you're going to need.
Yeah. So what we're doing there is we're finding the affected area. We're finding the amount of drop, and we're still somewhat guesstimating on what it's going to take to fill that void, assuming it's not deeper than we expect. A lot of times we'll drill through a slab and there'll be 10 inches of void and nobody knew. It's just acting as a bridge. So in those cases, we charge us like the steel piers, we charge a small amount per extra pound used, but we try to work with people because they didn't expect it any more than we did.
Yeah. Interesting. Tell me about a story where you did a job that was just a total nightmare. You lost money or something. Just happens to us all the time where we go out and we do a repair. It's a perfectly good repair, but we went over our limit and the owner didn't approve it, wasn't expecting it. It's like, hey, your contract says you can only spend $300 without getting approval. And we're like, wait, we thought we had approval. Where'd the disconnect go? And then we're like, I guess we're eating that $1,000 expense. Have you experienced similar things?
I think the only time I've really lost money was on that first slab replacement.
Oh,
I was a little bit
makes sense.
trying to help them out so much. Yeah, and I was unaware of everything that was going to come into it. I didn't take into consideration the pump truck. I didn't take into consideration the haul off. There was just a lot of things we got done, and we just ate the bullet to stop their home from being destroyed, if you will, from being at someone else's whims. And he was good intentioned. It was just not a good idea. So we lost money on that one just because we're trying to do the right thing. Every now and then I try to tide through the company and someone will go to pay their bill and we'll just tell them not to worry about it. But that's not really due to bad planning. It's just something that it's our community we're trying to serve.
Wow. And you do serve the community. I mean, you've done so much for so many people that I know. Where do you think you get that like giver's gain mentality from?
BNI.
No. It was long before BNI. You happen to be a good BNI cultural fit long before you knew what BNI was.
Yeah, honestly, it was just a matter of I came from nothing. I've when I started the foundation repair situation with those buddies, I kind of lost everything I had, and I found enough grace through the Lord that He gave it back to me. So I really tried to keep that first, and if I can help people through a hard time, I most certainly do. It's one of those. It's not something it's ever expected if I do it. It's just something I felt it on my heart. But I'm blessed, and I try to bless others. It's a blessing to be a blessing.
That's awesome. I love it. Is there anything? Do you like follow any, engineers that are prominent? Kind of a weird question, I guess. But there's so many industries where you've got like industry heroes that are pushing technology forward and pushing the industry forward. In the foundation repair business, is there an association of foundation repair people? Is there, an engineer that's really creating these new foams, these new mixes that's really pushing the boundaries of stuff? And is that somebody you'd follow, for example?
So ironically, I got approval from the Oklahoma Board of Engineering to put on continuing credit hours for the local engineers, because what I found in the industry is most people, they know what they've seen and they trust what they know. So they don't really innovate in situations that create liability for their company.
Yeah.
I have worked with a couple engineers that we know right now that we're actually doing some private label on some chemical formulations that we wanted to see out of foam. We took on our own manufacturing for the pure products because in COVID we couldn't get it. And I just worked out a licensing deal with a big distributor who's going to use our designs. So I would say we are that person. But at the end of the day, we're trying to better the industry, because at the end of the day, if everyone's doing things better, it just benefits everyone. It's not a or space, it's an and space. And I really feel that if we want to do well, we can do that through education just as much as proper repairs.
Wow.
So
amazing. Adam Sedlak is the owner and operator of Level Home Foundation Repair, where they do interior and exterior foundation piering, crawl space repair, and concrete lifting, foam injections. He's also done guttering as a loss-leading business to get the foundation work, which I love, by the way, since the lack of gutter is a huge reason why foundations shift in the first place, as you heard. Adam, we appreciate you being on the show.
Hey, I appreciate you, Matt.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Same Day Podcast. Tune in to a new show each week and be sure to subscribe to get future episodes.